Dharma. Just, you know, what does that name mean? Well, it could mean various things, but one thing it could mean is the Buddhist teachings, the Dharma, applied to the ecological crisis that we have. You know, but are they Buddhist teachings? Does our eco-Dharma conversation match up to the 4 Dharma stills, which are traditionally used as identifying characteristics of the Dharma? So first of all, do we recognize change and impermanence? I think we recognize change. We didn't expect COVID-19 to happen, and my response to the eco-crisis has certainly changed in the last few months. Impermanence, yeah, we should recognize that even when you plant a tree, you know, it's really just a temporary fix, and the carbon that that tree assimilates is going to be released back into the atmosphere sooner or later. And then we should recognize that sooner or later, one way or another, the eco-crisis isn't going to be there anymore. Secondly, do we recognize suffering? Rising sea levels, populations having to move, drought, flooding, forest fires, famine. I think we recognize those. And the causes of suffering, greed, hatred, delusion. Yeah, I think we recognize those too. We recognize emptiness. Ecology is a great teacher of this, and it has everything to do with interconnectedness, which is a part of the theme that we have for this evening, which I'll come back to later. But emptiness also has to do with non-attachment, and that would include non-attachment to the outcome of our endeavors as climate actions. And that's something certainly that I remember that we've talked about before in Eco-Dharma. And then fourthly, do we recognize nirvana? Well, I don't want to get caught up in a discussion about what nirvana means or doesn't mean. But do we really believe that we can snuffle out the flames of greed, delusion, and hatred, and change the trajectory that we're on and learn to live in harmony with nature? Do we believe that? Yeah, I think we do. And that's why we're here. So I believe that our Eco-Dharma is the Buddha Dharma, which in chapter 5 of the Lotus Sutra is likened to a rain cloud, a bit like the one that passed over Jamie a few minutes ago by the sounds of it. You'll just allow me to read a little bit from the verse section of chapter 5 of the Lotus Sutra. This beneficent cloud is laden with rain. Flashes of lightning sparkle and shine, and the sound of thunder echoes from afar, filling everyone with joyful anticipation. As the sun's rays are cloaked and a refreshing coolness settles over the earth, the dark cloud hangs down so low. It seems to be within arm's reach. It rains the same everywhere, equally falling in all 4 directions. Its flow is beyond measure, completely saturating the soil, growing on mountains, by rivers, in gorges, and hidden in recesses are plants, thickets, and herbs, trees both large and small, 100 kinds of grain, rice seedlings, sugarcane, grapevines. This rain moistens them all, none receiving less than its fill. The parched earth is thoroughly soaked, and the medicinal herbs and trees become equally lush. From this cloud comes water of one flavor, and thereby plants, trees, thickets, and forests receive the appropriate share of moisture, whether large, medium, or small. All of the trees equally in proportion to their size are able to grow and develop. Their roots, twigs, branches, and leaves, and their brilliantly colored blossoms and fruits all become fleshy and glossy by this one rainfall. So I think that likewise, we all respond in different ways to the one flavored rainfall of the Eco-Dharma rain. We have different thoughts and feelings about the ecological crisis. We might respond intellectually or emotionally, or we might respond with anger or fear or deep sadness. We may seek self-actualization or social identity, or we may be more coy, maybe at the forefront of our minds, or just another thing on a list of things that we worry about. And add into the mix changing circumstances, COVID-19, challenging times. We can see how different people at different times are inclined towards different actions. We may or may not be comfortable with civil disobedience or confident about lobbying politicians. Individual behavior changes depend on each of us as individuals. And there's prayer, of course, for those of us Buddhists that pray. Something happening in November in America that I don't think there's very much else that we in the UK can do about, but which has a big impact on the future of the world's ecology. These are all worthy actions with an important role to play, but I'm here to talk about green space projects, which I think are suitable to a wide range of different types of people in different kinds of ways. So what are they? Really, we're talking about actions that are taken on actual pieces of green space, usually in the public realm, so parks, open spaces, recreation grounds owned by local authorities, or it could be semi-public like schools and hospitals. And often it involves joining an existing or starting your own, if you need to, friends group or community group, which is associated with that site, and its actions are dedicated to that site. And it usually aspires to making an actual material difference to the space, so it can actually directly increase carbon sequestration and decrease emissions from the way the land is managed, and also decrease the negative local impacts of climate change that we have everywhere anyway. So planting a tree has a cooling effect on the environment. Excuse me. But through green spaces, you can also raise awareness, provide education. You can ensure the climate message gets to the people that are actually making management decisions about that land. You can work with the authority, developing a management plan which will help ensure sustainable management solutions for the site for the next 3, 5, or 10 years. There's also the hands-on practical work. So some of us might just want to be doing that. So you don't have to get involved in the political stuff, gardening, woodland management, conservation work. What you do will depend on the site and its role in the community. Rarely will greenhouse gas emissions reduction be the sole intention. So it's not necessarily going to be always just about the climate. But if it is about that, then probably the best thing to do, purely in terms of maximising the potential of the site as a carbon sink and minimising emissions, is to do nothing with zero action. Just let nature take over. It's a bit like the effortless effort that meditation teachers talk about. Just attentively observe. In this case, you're observing vegetation change, or what we call natural succession. For most situations in the UK, this natural succession leads in phases to broadleaf deciduous woodland. So if you have an abandoned plot where you just stop mowing the grass, then that's what you'll get in as little as 20 or 30 years, depending on the soil that's there and the proximity of other trees and shrubs and so on to seed in. Because no work is done this way, apart from maybe fencing it off, stop access, and nothing is imported onto the site, including energy, there are no emissions apart from those intrinsic to the site from the natural processes of respiration and decomposition, which is just like us breathing. That's natural processes. No one wants to try and stop that happening. In mature woodland, plants have jostled around and found their own spaces, horizontally and vertically, above and below the ground. So the whole volume of space that's available under the ground and above the ground on that site for plants to grow in, by the time a woodland has developed maturity, is being occupied by plants doing the job that they do of assimilating carbon dioxide and sequestering it into the soil or into the trunks, woody branches and so on of the trees, shrubs. But as you might have experienced, being effortless isn't easy. It requires trust and patience, which we might not have, but nor might the other people you need to convince. There'll be valid concerns over looking abandoned, site looking abandoned, and then people abusing it in some way, public access and safety that could ensue from that. Rewilding large areas, large rural areas, using grazing animals to manage the vegetation, like you might have read about Knepp Castle quite near here in Sussex where I live. That, great things to do, but not really applicable to kind of small urban sites that the kind of actions that I'm talking about are likely to be carried out on. not least because you couldn't introduce wild pigs onto them. But climate isn't our exclusive concern, and even if it is, there are other skillful means of working towards it. Projects could be more explicitly about biodiversity, sustainable food production, play, health, well-being. It could be a reading circle amongst some trees, or it could be landscaped space for Tai Chi or yoga. All of these things can have a strong ecological theme. Ain't so much what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's how I would put that. It's true that the hands-off approach is good for biodiversity too, but if wildlife is the main objective, then some kind of intervention or management is helpful. It enables a range of different distinct habitats to be included on the same site, and for particular species of, say, for invertebrates and birds to be targeted to attract to that site and provide habitat for them. So you could be making pond, hedgerow, meadow, woodland edge, all within quite a small area. The key thing is that we work with nature and not against it. But this is a difficult balance and requires that we check our actions. Are they right actions? Are they harmful or are they helpful? We need to consider the environmental impact of each thing. If you're bringing in materials, are they recycled? Are they recyclable? If you're buying in plants, are they grown in peat? Plants in containers need feeding and watering. That's very intensive. High demand for energy for the watering, and chemical fertilizers, which probably will have been used, big offenders in terms of releasing nitrous oxides into the atmosphere. But it's not straightforward, of course, between right and wrong. One person's right thing is another person's wrong thing. So there's plenty of scope for lively debate. We need to check our intentions and check natural processes. How would nature do it? The most conspicuous natural process is succession to woodland. We can manage that with a light touch, just thinning out the young trees as they grow up and coppicing, cutting some back so they grow up effectively younger than the other ones. That introduces age diversity, which makes the whole woodland more sustainable and more resilient. You can introduce glades, open spaces, and rides through it if there's room to do that. And ecotones, which is basically having a kind of blurred margin between one habitat and another, so that the pond grades through marshy ground into the meadow, or the woodland grades through scrubland into the long grass. This will bring habitat diversity and enable public access because you've got open spaces. It'll keep the place looking like it's managed, like somebody is caring about it, and it will still be carbon friendly. Or you can apply a higher intervention. You can clear all the existing vegetation. You can start buying plants in, perhaps buying plants for pollinator species specially selected for that. You start digging out ponds and making marshy areas. So effectively constructing a lovely wildlife garden. Some initial impact, but it can be managed sustainably. So those are the kind of choices that you might be making if you've got a site and you want to encourage biodiversity. I think the three most important things for the climate from Greenspaces is, first of all, to try and avoid fossil fuel power. So that's kind of like an obvious thing, but it might not be quite so obvious that would include watering because of the energy demand of purifying and pumping water. Also, to try to avoid disturbing the soil and the use of chemical fertilizers like I've just mentioned. I think that there's more carbon sequestered in the soil worldwide than there is in all the plants, vegetation worldwide, and in the atmosphere, that's in the atmosphere as well together. So that just shows how important soil is, and soil is much more resilient. It doesn't get burnt down in the same way as trees do. And with climate change happening and the kind of temperatures that we've been getting down here in the southeast of England lately, that all of a sudden becomes quite a realistic concern. The third one, I said there was three things. The third one is to try and create a diverse plant community, which is more resilient, or all your eggs in one basket. Also, it enables all the niches to be occupied by the different kind of plants in a multi-strata woodland effect. Now, this is important because if you've got multi-strata woodland, it means you've got a canopy of trees, and then you've got smaller trees underneath those, and then you've got shrubs underneath those, and then you've got herbaceous plants and grasses, and you have more open spaces in the dappled shade. And so you've got really every possible space vertically being occupied. I'm reminded of the plants, herbs, trees, and thickets, all large, medium, or small in size, from the Dharma reigns similarly, I read earlier. These ideas of avoiding soil disturbance, the multi-strata effect, are adopted in an approach to gardening which is becoming very popular and very closely associated with the climate problem, and that's the approach called forest gardens. It's a method of sustainable food production, edible plants selected, trees, shrubs, herbaceous plants, and crucially they're entirely, or at least mainly, perennial. When you think about how food is nearly all annual cropping, nearly all the food we eat is cropped annual, means you could keep disturbing the soil. You've got new interventions all the time which have high energy demands. If you've got perennial crops that you just plant them, and then they grow and then they produce a crop every year, then normal soil processes are not being disturbed. More and more biomass is being accumulated in the standing vegetation and in the roots, and it's far, far, far more effective in terms of the carbon problem. It's not to say that conventional annual cropping of vegetables is a bad thing. Community allotments is one of the options you've got in Greenspace. You could take on an allotment on an allotment site as a community project, and then you can do normal cropping of vegetables, carrots and cabbages and so on, using composting, mulching, green manure, no dig, all those kind of organic methods, permaculture type methods, which are used. And it's not nature, it's not actually natural processes, but it's close enough. It's working with nature. We talked about wild spaces, wildlife and food production. Just a few words about spaces for us to be in, for just sitting in, for meeting friends, therapy, yoga, etc. What kind of places suit us the best? Excuse me. Well, it depends, because we're all different, like we said, but it seems to have to do with how we evolved. As hunter-gatherers, we would apparently have felt most secure where we can see but not be seen. Prospect refuge. There's a theory that I learned when I was a student of horticulture, environmental psychology theory, called prospect refuge theory, which is that landscapes that offer prospect and refuge, places where you can see but not be seen, it's a bit like neck curtains, I think. Those are the kind of landscapes that we feel most at ease in. So woodland glade, like I mentioned earlier, sitting on the edge of the woodland looking out into the glade, or a group of trees in a park looking out into the open space. So good opportunities for tree planting. Tree planting's got to be mentioned. We're talking about green space projects, nice and simple. It has an end in sight. You get the plants, you agree what plant you're going to plant, where you're going to plant them, get all that sorted, get the trees, plant them, and then normally maintain them for 2 or 3 years. That's really important, because otherwise they probably won't survive and the whole thing would have been a waste of time. But then after that, you can hand it over to the landowners, to the local authority, because there's very little probably to do with those trees for the next 20 or 30 years or so. And then after that, it's another time altogether. They might need tree surgery and things. Local authorities, having declared a climate emergency, which has happened quite a bit lately, or something similar to a climate emergency, should be aiming to increase the tree canopy cover of their sites. This is really just a measure of the proportion, the percentage of a site which is covered in a tree canopy. So it's a really simple and easily quantifiable measure that you can set targets to. So they might want to change from 15% tree canopy cover in a park to 25 or 30%. And that's something that you can pester them about, and something that they would probably want to consider, because they've declared a climate emergency. So we can get involved in different ways: pestering the local authority, management, planning, fundraising, bringing people together, interpretation, communication, practical work, ongoing maintenance. The great master Tiantai of 6th century China famously said something like, "No affairs of life or work are ever contrary to the ultimate reality." So if all things arising cease in our ultimate reality or true nature, then this work we're talking about is our Dharma practice. I think we all realize that we are practicing eco-Dharma. However, there's a paradox. There always is in Buddhism. It's far beyond me to explain it. But in a conventional sense, we can work contrary to nature, and we do. Natural processes bring emptiness into sharp relief. We see in them nothing exists separately, permanently, unchangingly. Everything comes and goes dependent on everything else in this flowing dynamic web of interconnectedness. And as clear as this is from observing nature, we haven't seen it, and we've acted as if it isn't so. Hence now we have an ecological crisis. We need insight into how things actually are, and we need the kindness that arises from that insight. Let's just go back to planting a tree. How is this interconnected? How the wind and the sun will shape the tree, how it will cast shade and create conditions underneath it for other plants, how carbon cycles through the tree and nutrients and water, how the soil and climate influence the tree and vice versa, how your memories and experiences cause you to get involved, how you need to influence the environment to help the tree. How will you feel, say, in 30 years when you visit the tree again? How you enjoyed the company of other people planting trees, how you shared the planting across the globe. How somebody one day, perhaps in 100 years, will think further ahead still and plant another one to replace it. This is, of course, just a smidgen of all the interconnections. They are innumerable, or maybe there's 84,000, I'm not quite sure. But they are reflected to some extent in the diverse community of plants, fungi, bacteria, invertebrates, birds, mammals, and us. We are just one small part of the tree's ecosystem, responding and acting as we do in different ways, and hopefully deepening our connection with nature. I just would like to finish, if I may, with a little quote from the great master Thich Nhat Hanh, from his commentary on the Lotus Sutra, and specifically on the verse that I read earlier, or the verse that I read a part of earlier. So the verses describe the Dharma as being of a single flavour, just as the rain has one function, one effect, to nourish all the different species of plants and cause them to grow. The different teachings offered by the Tathagata as skillful means have but one taste, the taste of liberation and universal wisdom that delivers all beings to the realm of peace and joy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. You packed in so much into such a short time. Thank you for your thought-provoking talk. Lots and lots of information as well, which is wonderful. And I really love the fact that you've given us lots of practical things that we can do. And I'm sure if anybody's interested, you probably have got some things that we can follow it up with as well. Is that correct? Some sort of like places to get in touch with. Sorry, you're on mute, John. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm going to, if it's okay, I was hoping that I'm not very good at hosting stuff on this iPad because I'm a bloke and I can only do one thing at a time. But I was hoping that I'll get a whole load, once we've had a discussion, and if there's anything else that people want, there's quite a lot of links that I could offer which would back up the stuff that I've said. There might be even other ones that come out of the discussion. So I'll email them, and hopefully I can send it all out by email. That's okay.
That would be brilliant. Thank you so much, because I think there's so much information to take in. But I also like that what you said, it's about our attitude towards what we do as well. It's our intention. So thank you very, very much for that. The next person I've got to, I'm very happy to introduce to talk about, oh, sorry, that's my church bell going, Challenging Times, Greenspaces, Buddhism and Interconnectedness, is Sharon Harrison, who's going to talk about her practical application of gleaning. So I didn't know much about gleaning, and she will explain what that's all about. So Sharon, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. Just unmute myself there. Okay, so well, hello everybody, and thank you for offering to listen to me. And I'm here to talk about gleaning and my practice of Nichiren Buddhism, which by its very nature would include interconnectedness. As Nichiren Buddhists, we chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo for the happiness of ourselves and others, as I can't be absolutely happy while you suffer. We have a principle called Ichinen Sanzen, which is 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, meaning there's a potential of 3,000 different responses to every single moment of life. To me, that translates to life being limitless. Our emphasis is also on creating value, whatever we do, wherever we do it. I was in my 40s when I left London and moved to Margate. So as you can imagine, it was quite a cultural change. I was one of very few Black people. So part of the welcome that I received was I was invited to all sorts of things that I hadn't heard of and hadn't done before. One such thing was gleaning. The conversation went a little bit like this. Hi, do you want to come and harvest some cabbages? What? Do you want to come and harvest some cabbages? Why would I want to do that? Haven't you seen the TV programs? Black people don't get involved with the countryside. Just come, you'll enjoy it. And by the way, Black people can get involved with anything. I went along, got a few minutes training and an area of the cabbage field and went on with harvesting the cabbages. There was a varied group of people, mostly students like the person who organised it, but older couples and some people on their own. There were only adults on this one because of the use of knives. We lunched together, chatted together, laughed together, and generally enjoyed the day. We filled the van with literally tons of cabbages, then took some for ourselves. We were also asked about local organisations who may make use of them. The sadness was that we left about a third of what we started with still in the field. But there a love affair began, or an understanding that I could contribute to getting food to people who needed it. Yes, I could make a difference. Since then, I've harvested many different crops, including leeks, cherries, purple sprouting broccoli, all on Kent farms. On one of the apple gleans, there was a boy of about 11 who appointed himself as our foreman. He brought us bags to fill and picked them up after they were filled, then picked apples to feed his team, giving us each a slice between collecting bags. A future manager, I'm sure. This, of course, was a family glean with children from about 4 upwards running in and out of the trees in the orchard. Again, the amount that was picked was measured in tons, and there was significantly more left hanging on the trees. All the young people that I've taken with me on the glean have enjoyed it, much as that boy whose mum shared that he didn't want to come that morning, but clearly changed his mind. The pain of leaving tons of product behind in the field or orchard led me to finding out more about the whole process and asking a few questions about why. I was also working as a supply teacher, so seeing kids hungry and hangry at school. I'd made connections with a few community organisations locally who served free meals or at a vastly reduced price. I'd pitch up with a carload of produce and give them as much as they could take. A couple of years ago, I provided an organisation with several sacks of squashes and pumpkins. And then on my visit a couple of days later, one of their clients sat there eating lunch and enthusiastically told me, lunch is the best. The centre manager was so happy with my contribution that she just came out, filled a spoon of the meal that they'd made and just shoved it in my mouth to make sure that I didn't miss out. Gleaning then is getting out into the fields where our food is grown and picking or harvesting what we can. This is after the farmer's done his commercial harvest, and it's through an organisation that I do it. Who then is gleaning for? Anyone who is able to stand and carry the produce to the bagging or collecting point. Well, now we've debunked the notion that Black people don't get involved in outdoor pursuits because me, my sisters, and my 83-year-old mum go regularly. And yes, we do meet other Black people there. It's also part of the reason why we have been in the newspaper and on TV probably. I've taken a child of 4 who had a ball. So age isn't a barrier either. It can also be a really great family day out. In the present climate where people have been on lockdown, creating a challenge to mental health, it's a fantastic antidote. What are the benefits? People are fed fresh fruit and vegetables for free or at a very affordable price. They can then use the money they've saved for paying for other things like electricity, gas, or shoes for their children. The young people that I've taken have also been introduced to food poverty. They were very proud that they could be part of the solution and make it possible for children, some in their own school, to have the fresh fruit that they'd taken for granted. On a very personal level, I get a great sense of achievement. Whatever the produce, when I look at what I've picked, I think, yeah, that's a good day's work. There's no pressure though, so I get to walk around the farm and just experience the space. There are times when I've just sat and eaten from what we've picked and listened to happy people talking about something and nothing. I'd like to give you a little warning here though. Don't eat too many cherries in one sitting. They can make quite a quick comeback. I'd like to offer this warning to the youngsters that I go with. They usually ignore me, but it's great when the only facilities that we've got are the next field. So they really need to think about it. I'm also really heartened when I see young people take to gleaning. They love it, especially the ones who don't like the confinement of a classroom, because this is where they shine. And they can become quite competitive, just competing as to who can pick the most in the shortest period of time. There are also too many kids who feel that you can only eat fresh fruit and vegetables from the supermarket. So picking and putting it straight in your mouth is such a satisfying discovery for them. I must admit that I do often struggle to leave whichever farm it is, especially when there's still so many apples on the tree, cabbages to be cut, or potatoes to be sorted, and the sun is high in the sky, or indeed there are good mud puddles. It really gives me so much. It's the best situation, really, enjoying the space while I'm doing something that I enjoy and that makes other people's lives better. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Sharon. That's so wonderful. Wonderful to hear, you know, the pleasure it gives you and also make a difference. I'm loving that. It's just great. Thank you so much. It's so heartfelt. I want to go gleaning with you, definitely.
Don't worry, you're committed now.
And it works on so many levels, and I love that you're handing it over and to the new generation as well, the next generation, the young people. So before we go into get great breakout rooms, sorry, I can't speak today, I just thought it might be worth to take a minute just to reflect on our deeper purpose of being here, you know, maybe to just think about what we've heard, what's had an impact, just to take a moment of being with ourselves in silence, and then we will go into breakout rooms. So please do enjoy taking just a minute's silence. Thank you. Thank you very much. One of the things that came up for me was just that, Sharon, you've painted such a wonderful picture of a possible future as well, which is really lovely. So we're now going to go into breakout rooms of small group meetings for about half an hour, maybe 35 minutes. And we've got some questions for you, but you can talk about anything you want to, of course, any reflections. Our questions are, what are you doing at this moment? So it's an opportunity for us to share. What else would you like to do? Maybe also, what are the obstacles? And how can we support each other in doing what we want to do and encourage others as well? So I think Jamie's going to post those questions, it's just a structure to go by. And then we'll come back again and Caspar will moderate the group discussion. So enjoy your breakout rooms, enjoy getting to know each other. Thank you so much both of our speakers so far, and look forward to seeing you again in a short time.